Ivan Reddy from ORTLOS. It's really quite interesting because last week we had Anna Heringer here, and Anna is also based in Austria, and I guess we're going to sort of see what the biggest contrast we just can get between these two speakers coming from the same place in Europe. Now, what is interesting is that Austria, being a very small country, is a very diverse scene. And Ivan Reddy and Andrea Reddy studied in Graz, whereas Anna Heringer came from Linz. This is sort of, what, 100 kilometers apart? 150?
It's like 300.
Is it? Well, 300 kilometers apart, but it's sort of also worlds apart. And the interesting thing is that Ivan was just telling me that his mentor, while he was finishing his studies, was Günther Dominik. And the Grazer Schule, as it was known in Europe, was a very, and in the world, was a very thriving scene where people like Günther Dominik brought in Daniel Libeskind for a year, or Tom Main. And in fact, Ivan then studied with Tom Main for a year, and then went to Los Angeles to work for Morphosis for a while. Ivan and Andrea then set up in the year 2000 ORTLOS. And in fact, they're sort of the first generation, digital generation from the Graz scene. And ORTLOS means spaceless. And it's in itself a quite interesting, provocative statement. Because what they're really interested in is issues of networks and a different sort of architectural practice, which is not just based on the traditional studio, but a much more ephemeral, fluid network system of how architecture can be generated and created. I think what for me particularly is really interesting is the notion of the embodied virtuality, of something that is actually very corporeal and real, but it's also quite virtual. And terminology that sort of crops up in their work is to do with cybernetics or network theories, sort of cross conversations between photography, architecture, graphic design, advertising, film. Tomain talks about peripatetics, whatever that means. You might explain that later on. I mean, ORTLOS also taught at the Bartlett for a year, and it's obviously great to have them back and have Ivan back to explain what their work is. And they just opened an exhibition here in London, which I invite you to join, which is open until the 3rd of March, in the Austrian Cultural Forum, which shows some of their recent work. There's also a quite important publication that was published in 2005 with a lot of their work, and Tomain was or wrote the foreword. So thank you for coming. And while you were actually a tutor here, you didn't have the opportunity to talk, so it's quite wonderful that you're back and actually giving the talk now. And looking forward to this contribution to our lecture series. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus, for this very nice introduction. And I'm really glad to be back again here at Bartlett. Hans Hollein claimed in the 60s, everything is architecture, and in German is alles ist Architektur. And indeed, I think that architecture is everything. And even more, we are living now in extraordinary times with endless possibilities. After 10 years of professional practice, ORTLOS is now in a phase of reflecting upon least, for us, an extraordinary adventure. Until now, we have been preoccupied with hyper-production of various things, with a constant fear that there is something there we maybe miss. I would assume that sometimes it was like this, you know, like you don't have time, you just move on, and whatever happens, you just react quickly and continue. I would assume for you that it might be no easy task to really grasp what is ORTLOS and what we are actually doing. So I have to admit sometimes for myself is not quite easy. So recently I have counted our websites. So just to count main domain names, all dedicated to very different topics, which is ortlos.com, is kind of more focused on the architectural work we do, also more commercial work we do. Then it's ortlos.at, which is a site dedicated to our research project. So we are praxis-oriented office, but we have strong emphasis on research. Then it's ortlos.info, which is focused on virtual world making, especially Second Life, or various platforms used to kind of simulate virtual environments. Then it's ortlos.org, which is a site dedicated to spaces or environments, let's say, which are sensitive to the users, to the topics such as human-computer interaction and similar experiments within the real space, actually, augmented realities and so on and so on. There is also ortlos.net, which connects our partners from last 10 years. Some of them are just individuals. Some of them are institutions like Fraunhofer Institute we work very close with, or Institute for Computer Graphic and Visualization from TU Graz, very close partner of us, but also philosopher Georg Flachbart, who is our partner. So this page kind of summarizes the work also from our partners, not only from ourselves. And Marcus mentioned we are transdisciplinary practice, so we built up this community in the last 10 years, which grew, as I said, to kind of 20 partners. There's also my own web page where I try to kind of figure out what the next step can be done, or I write about different things. There is also sites about the products we do, programming stuff we do. Like the newest thing we do is application for iPhone. We are official Apple developer, and we recently published application called Gandhis. It's available on Apple Store, so it's used to kind of design with iPhone in terms of energy efficiency. And also not to forget my DJing website, which something I also like to do and to experiment with. So I have unfortunately lost the domain advancedarchitecture.com. I'm really sad about this. It was a great domain name, but I had so many domain names that at one point I just forgot to renew the domain, so this one is gone. Marcus mentioned it, our new and upcoming book, Architecture of the Networks, The Emergence of Network Design and Thinking, which is coming soon, and exhibitions of our work currently to be seen at Austria Culture Forum in London and Kunsthaus Mürzzuschlag in Austria, and accompanying iPad application we are now developing. With all these instruments, I hope that all these puzzles, puzzle pieces we produced until now will somehow come together to make a bigger picture. This is obviously cover of our book Marcus mentioned previously. It is the first volume in this series of Architecture of the Networks, and is done in collaboration with David Carson. So it's, again, the book itself is a collaborative process where we completely left David to do design as he thinks it's right. Today, I will not explain our work project by project, but rather will go through a series of examples from history in order to explain how is our work positioned within a specific context. Tom Main raised this question in the introduction. Marcus mentioned it to our previous book by asking, how can one approach a world characterized by ambiguity, contradiction, infinitive complexity, unknowability, which is simultaneously smaller, faster, flatter. Quintessential question. Is it Yves Klein architecture of the air, a leap into the void? This thing you've made, this collaborative translocal network, your words, thinking, seeing, constructed intersections of human experience, specializing in placelessness and ephemerality, visualizing, theorizing the invisible. Fuller said, architecture is in the end invisible, didn't he? So let's start with Renaissance. Robert Flood produced a diagram describing the process of perception used in the study of perception, consciousness, and psychology. In this diagram, Flood wanted to explain the nature of perceptible world as being classified into 4 realms of sensual, imaginable, intellectual, and sensible. He describes how these realms are perceived by psychological faculties, which he classified in 3 pairs: science and imagination, consciousness and reflection, and memory and motive. The diagram shows the interplay and connection between different psychological faculties within the psyche and their relationship to perceptive world. The soul is described as being present in all 3 parts of the psyche, always as an intersection between pair of psychological faculties. Consciousness and reflections are also attributed rational, intellectual, and human qualities. In her influential book, The Art of Memory, Frances Yates describes the striking and exciting feature of Flood's memory system is that memory buildings are what he calls theaters. And by this word theater, he does not mean what we should call a theater, a building consisting of stage and auditorium. He means a stage. The idea of stage is used for mnemonic purposes, and the theater is real, though symbolic device for the art of memory. Beside mnemonic principles and techniques used to organize memory, impressions, improve recall, and assist in combination and invention of ideas, it describes the search toward eternal knowledge about our universe. Yates suggests that Flood may have heard of Giuliano Camillo's theater, which he influenced him to design this and develop this idea of the theaters when he traveled across Europe, most likely in France. So what I'm showing here is at that time in Renaissance there was strategy to figure out how you can kind of explain and kind of understand this knowledge the people produced until then and visualize it as well. Italian philosopher Giuliano Camillo notes that l'idea del teatro is concerned with the eternal aspect of all things. Camillo speaks of a system that, as he says, makes scholars into spectators. He is imagining a theater in its original sense as a place in which spectacle unfolds. Camillo suggests that the world was made of primary matter. This is, of course, connected as all Renaissance thinker to ideas of Aristotle, that there must be some atoms which then are primary matter. This primary matter is the material of all that is manifest. Camillo taught that by reducing knowledge into constituent parts, you could come closer to the original essence and consequently understand what makes the world tick. Likewise, by inverse, through comprehending the universe, you would understand its essential ingredients. His key to this was in the creation of symbolic systems that both represent the essence of material as well as relationships between essences that allow the universe to maintain its being. The idea of the theater was fundamentally a structure of conceptual relationships rather than a building of wood or stone, and it is on that level that Camillo's work bears most fruit. The theater is to be understood in terms of time and space, a spatial representation of knowledge. And this is something which interests myself or ORTLOS, that it is not about single objects, what I mean, but it's about relationships. And the second thing is how to represent this huge amount of data, which is, of course, knowledge, and to make kind of sense out of it. Sorry, just a quick. Yates is also mentioning Ramon Lull. Lul designed a method which was intended as the baiting tool for winning Muslims to the Christian faith through logic and reason. Through these detailed analytic efforts, Lul built in an in-depth theological reference by which a reader could enter in an argument or question about Christian faith. The reader would then turn to the appropriate index and page to find the correct answer. So how this works, if you have a question about Christianity and you are Muslims and you should convert to Christianity, then you kind of do something with a little machine and the proper answer comes to you and you then convert. So I mean, it's with science, it's kind of easy to do this because we believe in science that we are working with facts and eternal truth, but in religion, it's, I would say, not quite an easy task. So how Lul did this? What you see is the Lulian circle, each of which consisted of 2 or more paper discs inscribed with alphabetical letters or symbols that refer to lists of attributes. The disc could be terms or symbols relating to those terms, were laid around the full circumference of the circle. They were then repeated on an inner circle which could be rotated. These combinations were said to show all possible truth about the subject of the circle. Lul based this on the notion that there were a limited number of basic, undeniable truths in all fields of knowledge, and that we could understand everything about these fields of knowledge by studying combinations of these elements' truths. So again, there are certain numbers of things we really know and understand, and we can explain everything, but recombining these simple truths. This is what we have today, data visualizations. This is how we represent in the modern world complex systems or let's say a huge amount of data. So it's, if you compare it, it's very similar technique. There is no much change there, except that we today live, as some people claim, in a petabyte age. So we work with much more data than we had access to in Renaissance, obviously. So the idea was developed further on by Giordano Bruno in the 16th century and by Gottfried Leibniz in the 17th century for investigations into philosophy of science. Leibniz gave Lul's idea the name ars combinatoria, by which it is now often known. Some computer scientists have adopted Lul as a sort of founding father, claiming that his system of logic was beginning of the information science. So again, this is a memory wheel by Giordano Bruno, very similar to Ramon Lul's system, and this is how, for example, one example of how we visualize the data today. So, do I have another one? Yeah, I have another one. This is example of very simple data visualization for radio last FM. So different music styles, how they've been played and how they connect. So basically this is not a drawing, this is kind of computer simulation or let's say visualization of certain data. So again, this is again not a drawing, this is data visualization of all photographs in a certain period took in London. So by tourists. So you see in which areas the tourists go and where they took the photographs, and they are then represented by short lines. So this again makes us understand there are certain parts of London which are more interesting to tourists than the other ones. So when I talk about data visualization, this is necessary in order to understand complex networks, or let's say the world we live in today. I would say that especially in the times of this economic crisis, when most of the people say, yeah, the main reason is because nobody really understood how these complex networks in the financial world really works and what is the impact and so on and so on. I think it became really necessary to think of these strategies. But I would say the more interesting thing than the data visualization is so-called knowledge retrieval, which means that we have to somehow make sense out of this data. So just to kind of represent the data is just one step to understand phenomena and complex networks, but we have to make sense out of this data. So we produced this strategic image very much based on the diagram you saw by Robert Flood to kind of issue topics we are interested into. And there are three of those main topics, which is virtual prototype, namely the things we're working with, spaces which we are simulating, developing by digital technology. Then virtual enterprise is considering all ways of collaborative practice, where we collaborate in transdisciplinary networks today, dislocated. And virtual environment is considered the environments where we do all of this. And I will show later a couple of examples what it means, but basically that environments, we're thinking of environments which are responsive to us and not vice versa. Normally, we adapt ourselves to environments, and not only to spaces, but all technical devices we are using. And I think there's time now to become a master of these technologies and to kind of think that the spaces should adapt to us. So in terms, when we talk about sensitive spaces, it means that the space is sensitive to the people and not vice versa. I will try also to position architecture of the networks as an intersection of design, social space, and a range of complex rational information models in order to create new opportunities for collaborative practice as a new field, as an enabling platform in the end, from transdisciplinary connected intelligence. Developing new forms of architectural practice is for me a departure point toward a new architecture. First, it is important to mention that I will not make distinction between contemporary practice and transdisciplinary methods I suggest. I don't want to put them against each other or to benchmark them for greater benefits. From my point of view, there is nothing wrong with the current architectural practice. At least the future steps of development are predictable and have already been described in various publications. I'm simply interested in alternative working methods by following a simple question. If the various disciplines today became too complex for one creative mind or a group of experts to be grasped or handled in order to provide a proper visionary solution or even to ask appropriate question, then what model can be proposed to explore new ideas and possibilities in a professional practice? I believe that an answer to this question can only become visible in the moments in which an attempt fails to realize this intention. It is this ability rather than ability to achieve a certain goal that triggers our perception of system, even a possible debate about it. It was very clear in the early stage of the projects that gaining knowledge about creative networks, that the first step has to be building and creating proper working tools, and by doing this, gaining knowledge about creative network transdisciplinary collaboration in the first phase of architectural design project. I will explain this. I just have to kind of abandon my vanity and put the glass on because I actually didn't see what I'm reading, so now I see it. So I know I look different, but what I mean by this is that first what I said is kind of the failure is the moment where we learn about the system. If the system never fails, we will know anything about the system. So in German there is a word we like which is called grandios Scheitern. So it's glorification of failure. And the second thing what I mentioned is that in order to kind of think about new architecture, if we dare to call something new in academic kind of environment, is to kind of think of not formally or functionally, but to think more about performance of architecture in terms of how we can change the architectural practice first. Otherwise, and also not to search the answer in architectural field itself. So the concept of designer thinking through his drawing, as you may learn from, as I learned from my teachers, you know, that Computers are a priori bad, you know, technology is a priori bad. All the ideas start in your mind, and the first sketch, you know, the first genius sketch is the kind of driving force of architecture. I don't know if this is still in architectural schools, this opinion, but from my point of view, this is complete nonsense, because it doesn't change anything which tool I'm using. I'm still thinking. I mean, when I work something in the computer, I don't turn off my brain. I don't turn my brain off. So I will see that this is a main perception for design for decades. Design was seen as a manipulative process of formal representation done by drawing or modeling. However, if the form finding is based upon performance, that emergence is a preference rather than preconceived formal content. In virtual environments, such models can be conceived completely different. The traditional role of designer as an operator is extended to designer as a tool builder. Tool builders can define their own generative components and define their transformal behavior. So what I said before is that when I get angry about my system and the system forced me to do things in a certain way, there is only one possibility, namely to design my own tools, especially when it comes to the digital tools. I would rather say it's quite easy. And what we had in the last 10 years now is, you see, you can recognize which architects use which software, for example, which is quite strange for myself, because then the technology dictates the design, and therefore that was always, let's say, argument of older school, that they said, yeah, look, all these typical things, you know, it's like computer stuff. Anyway, so we did that. Basically, we researched and programmed our own tool for creative network collaboration in transdisciplinary environments. We programmed a platform which can be used by transdisciplinary partners, means a philosopher, writer, media theorist, architect, politician, even a client can be part of this network and use this system. We designed very simple interface design. We remove menus, for example. There is no undo button anymore. There is kind of a lot of thinking about how the process should work. We connected somehow to Jackson Pollock action painting. We try to develop the tool where you concentrate on work itself and not on using tool itself. If you take a very expensive system, for example, as CATIA, a license of CATIA costs, I don't know, 20,000 euro, for example, in its basic version, then you have to pay another 15,000 euro just to kind of learn how to use the tool, and you will still not be able to use it. Then all the thing became meaningless and senseless for me, because the tools should be intuitive, really straightforward, and so on. So it seems to me in the software world, it was until now, the more expensive a tool and more complicated the tool, the better the tool is, which is, of course, a nonsense. So I showed just quickly examples of projects we realized with this platform. We worked on a smaller project. We used it for a smaller project, but also for the city planning project called City Upgrade, with something about 15 partners taking part from various disciplines. And the intelligence of this system is also that it's tracking of who is doing what. So it can kind of tell you how the collaboration, let's say, between architect and philosopher worked, and in some cases, what happened if the economy expert comes, and how this influenced the project, and so on and so on. So, and then from that you can gain additional knowledge. And I have to say, it's, I don't know if you really get me. This is 4 years project, and you have to see it live, not just like screens, but it's very, very fast and very intuitive, and it also allows you, it's done for this first creative phase of the project where you don't know what you're doing. It's not about the idea where the other professions, other experts are acting as consultants to architects, which was the practice until now. It's a moment where you're developing the idea for a project with other experts from different disciplines. And this is something also we have to learn. I think architects want to control everything. They're so possessive about their work, and in some cases they won't allow other experts to be part of it, except for consultants. They do something and then ask statistical engineering, oh, how you can do this to stand, you know, doesn't fall down. So there's another tool I mentioned, maybe it's again this iPhone application. And whenever we have a problem with software technology, we just actually do this and do our own software, and are not trying not to be dependable on technology. So ORTLOS, as Marcos mentioned, is a German word, and it means placeless, without space or space off. And we choose our studio name inspired by the sources from a media theory, especially by Peter Weibel, who is describing ORTLOS as Entordnung in German, meaning dislocation. And architectural theory considering discussions about the site. For example, Daniel Libeskind wrote very influential text, Kein Ort an seiner Stelle, which means in English, no space on its place. Which means we don't say there are no spaces anymore, there are no real spaces, but no space is on its place. It's a little bit a different condition. This obviously the plan of Libeskind, who was my teacher and was very influential, I have to admit, to my own work when I started to dealing with two crucial questions: how and in which context we are operating. So-called nomadic working methods are clear strategy for organizing connected, however dislocated, project partners in advanced teleworking situation. Therefore, the classic idea of architectural studio as a collaborative factory mutates to a virtual network platform. In order to make this structure operational and efficient, new tools, as I have mentioned, have become necessary. On the other hand, content-wise, ORTLOS does not mean no space has its place in specific context, but rather that no space is bound to a particular place. Today, in this sense, local constraints and local characteristics play a less important role in particular context. The site is not just a piece of land anymore, but a node in a dynamic network of complex interrelationships as well, primarily influenced by information coming from somewhere else. Furthermore, the very important relationship between the building and the site in the recent past has become a weak tie, or just one of many correlations. Although this is from the project Playa Vista for Los Angeles, USA. Although networks have been treated more in the sense of infrastructure and tooling, network thinking has been present in architectural theory for many years. Louis Kahn treats the city as a network of dynamic flows within his project for Philadelphia. This is a traffic study, 1953. Likewise, Jona Friedman designed a framework where people are living suspended inside the infrastructure. Buckminster Fuller developed Space Frame 1958 as a three-dimensional network built of steel rod elements placed into a geodesic structure representing nodes and links. As seen on many pictures showing Buckminster Fuller within the space actually telling us that he's occupying the networks, so everybody is invited. He predicted at that time that we are all invited to live within the web. A radical approach at that time towards something which presented in an analog way would have meant a digital revolution later on was in sense naive. As Mark Wigley points out, you don't live in the web itself in the most of this project, but in the space, its frames. Nevertheless, the development enhanced other architects interested in networks or network architecture, especially when architects discovered the dynamic parameters of network spaces as a field of action for occupants who themselves inhabit the spaces and link themselves without predetermination and prescriptive methods for planners. Archigram, plug-in city networks, turns the whole UK into abstract model of network using to show areas of high and low densities. Dennis Crompton, in his project Computer City, 1964, shows a drawn model for representation city where people literally live in a circuitry itself. Connectivity at any scale is seen to be lateral, as Wigley points out. Among many similar examples, such Archisum Non-Stop City, 1970. It's Archisum. So basically what they do is they provide infrastructure where the people can organize themselves and inhabit the spaces as they like, and you see different scenarios for this usage. Or Constance Utopia infrastructure of New Babylon. The most abstract in my, beside all of these examples, the most abstract, in my opinion, most precise was one by Super Studio, the project called Super Surface, 1972. Super Studio staged the environment as an endless, fully exposed horizontal surface with people nomadically wandering across the network of energy and information extending to every properly inhabitable area. So this is really something nomadic, because you can move around with yourself and your family, and whenever you decide to kind of stop and make yourself home, you can do this because there is infrastructure provided. In year 2000, we wrote for Biennale catalog following: ORTLOS must be kind of matrix, an infinitive, constantly changeable field of the creative entries of those who shape it. From a certain size on, the constructs show the first signs of self-organization. And so it has been with ORTLOS right from the beginning. It is a kind of virus that is spreading, and although in the background, it makes you gradually sink into a world whose laws correspond to different logic. ORTLOS is an instrument for nomadic working methods. So here we go. We now know what we are doing. And as I said, this idea of community, this kind of idea that is not a classical architectural studio, that there are many people involved in the whole process, but sometimes you don't know what the next step will be. Situationist artist Constant defines New Babylon, the city of near future, as the World Wide Web for spontaneous play. All technical infrastructure is buried below the surface, so the open framework above can be endlessly reconfigured. In this sense, the network is not only space for action, but also a space which invents completely new kind of action. As Wigley described it, the vast sprawling scaffolding that defines the new city is intended as post-revolutionary incubator for new kinds of special practice. As for theoretical backgrounds, Marxism had a strong influence on Constant, who envisioned a non-capitalistic city, but saw the significance of the project as the space where the users are free to continually reshape it. As I would say, the tragic of all the utopia is that when such a concept is realized in real life, or unintentionally realized, it may happen that looks like this, which is an example of turbo-capitalistic usage of resources and polluting the environment. This is Lagos, Nigeria, where the multinational companies, oil companies such as Shell, explode for purpose of gaining oil. Anyway, we used this idea for our installation at La Biennale in Venezia in 2000, where you can see this idea how we split the levels. You have the infrastructural level on the ground, then you have the open space and development of form of shape, which was, in this particular case, a multimedia tunnel above. So it was also an experiment to try to figure out how you can experience one and the same exhibition from 4 points of view. It was also broadcasted into the internet, so you can see what is actually happening inside. We put all the drawings on the floor, so the people should walk on top of the drawings, kind of, you know, also protest. We don't need drawings anymore. We just like walk on them. This is a conceptual drawing then for how we develop the form of the installation. And yes, indeed, we are using digital technology and we are working within virtual spaces, but we also like to kind of build things. And this was built in Graz, very complex shape, the series of these rods, which are in different angles and positions to each other. Although it was easy to assemble it, I think we have been the first one who finished the work, and the other ones didn't even arrive. Logistically was everything perfectly planned. In one day, we had our exhibition. And it looked exactly as we had it in our renderings. So we simulated and calculated everything, and there was, in that sense, no surprise, except that we like it a lot. Cedric Price. So what I want to say also is that we're using exhibitions, installation zones to test the concepts and to kind of develop the ideas further on. Cedric Price, Fun Palace, project of 1961 to 64, took these ideas even further. Not ours, Constance. Organized in a space as an open grid of elevator towers and necessary equipment like bathrooms, the user occupying the space can redefine architectural function by determining what is happening. Most units are plugged in and it can be removed as needed. The space is continually reshaped by changing desires of inhabitants and by adjusting the atmosphere of the sound, light, and information for the performance. Everything responds to the visitor's demands. There is a continual flux of events and interconnections between them. The engineered structure in which architecture turns to be an infrastructure for event spaces has almost disappeared. The series of drawings by Cedric Price, which are, for myself, less drawings than instructions how to use the space, how this space can be activated. These spaces are not rooms, but zones of certain atmospheric intensity. Fun Palace is intended to be kind of incubator for new kinds of nomadic architecture that refuses to be fixed. This is also architecture in this case means that architecture acts as enabling platform, establishing dynamic networks and influences that withdraw of classical understanding of the building. So in that sense is when I said on the beginning that the talk is about performative network design. In this sense is the performance, not the performance like in theaters or in the concerts, but more the question what architecture does, not necessarily the questions how the architecture looks like or how it functions. So more the question, as I said, what the doing does. A building generates productivity by variety of information exchange, and it is a physical manifestation of social networks. An attempt to produce a free four-dimensional volume presupposes integration of hardware, software, and activity. An architecture that believes that Price tries to shape a new form of intelligence by depowering traditional architectural mechanisms. We use these ideas, or we developed based on these ideas, the concept for the project called In Space In. And you see the main components of this project. We had the idea that there should be spaces. If the user is able to change the space, then the space should move. So normally we move through the spaces, and here is reversed. The space moves around us. And since the space is built out of the information, we can generate new spaces on demand. In order to produce these movable spaces, we also have to think how we can build it, how we can construct it. And as you see, this I have to go back, a series of rods interconnected by membranes. And if you move one part of the installation, then everything else moves. So we had to develop a series of pneumatic arms, which we can then control. We developed this project together with Ars Electronica Center, and there were a couple of technical issues to solve. Also, how, when the surface moves, how you can project still sharp image. So the projector itself has to adapt all the time. Basically, we have video floor, we have projection walls, we work with information as text to this LED displays. So the different type of information sources brought together. And because, as I said, the space is based on information as a building block, one can generate different type of spaces. That was implemented then for Expo in Japan, where we additionally work with compressed wood as a material to kind of frame the installation. This interoperable network structure that is related to communication, information, and learning can be expanded into a mechanism that produces thinking by mixing diverse forms of knowledge. Vitruvius insisted that the unique characteristic of architect is the need to be familiar with all other specialized areas of knowledge. Any particular design requires the architect to resolve many seemingly incompatible forces. The architect is seen as a form of synthetic intelligence, and design is understood as a form of thinking. Buildings are more the products of these networks than of individuals. This merging of intelligent architecture and architectural intelligence most clearly depicted and explained in the work of Konrad Weichmann. The network intelligence of a school of architecture is used to produce image of network intelligence. Medium becoming message, becoming medium. In his programming guide, he describes multidimensional network of interdisciplinary system without barriers of institutions exploding in a universal, international, and comprehensive planned research. Konrad Weichmann was a teacher, but actually he was a statistical engineer who used these ideas to generate very complex, as you see, statistical systems for hangars, for example. Weichmann called the unlimited expansion of any given problem or task simultaneously reaching in all directions a spatial expansion of categories of facts, subject matters, and relationships. The interwoven structural webs are kind of self-reflecting upon the field, which a machinery thinks by itself and produces knowledge, a visible node concentrating in a visible area of invisible flows. This invisible area on the visible flow was the departure point for our project, The Thing in the Wing, in 2003, where we developed, where we have been invited to develop the gateway to Graz, which was at that time a cultural capital of Europe. And we designed a sculpture out of two parts, The Thing and the Wing. The Thing is 30-meter high structure on the freeway, and the Wing is 60-meter long structure. And since it's on the freeway, it can be only perceived through movement. When you do objects, for example, for museums, or even when you explore the buildings, then the buildings obviously doesn't move, and you can choose, you can stand, look at it, choose the perspective, and so on and so on. Here you cannot stop. I mean, you can cause the traffic accident, but you experience the unity of these two parts through the movement. So we did a series of simulations to kind of fix the distance between two objects. It was developed through a series of simulations where we had a container full of particles and lines, which are lines of the movement, and these particles attack the lines, more or less, to put it simply, and develop the shape of the wing, which then became kind of extension as the thing. Also, statically was interesting. It's held only on 3 points. So if you are there, and I will see the white. Okay, there's a pointer. Okay, now if you move this part, the whole structure will shake. Also, what is important is that The thing was produced in several places and shipped around. The rods have been bought in Britain, in UK, because they're so big. You cannot buy it anywhere else in Europe. Then they've brought to Germany, bent in a proper curvature. It's a NURB, so it's not like a circle or any normal geometry, let's say. So it's a free form. So they had to bend it in Germany and then ship to Graz. And the upper part, the head of the sculpture, was done in Vienna and shipped to Graz. So assembled on the very small site. And it's 7 meters in the diameter. So when they shipped it from, the head from Vienna to Graz, they have to close the whole freeway. Many car drivers at that time probably hate us. Also, they have been reporting in their rear mirrors aliens and so on, because it was lit during the night, so it looked, or that they will fall down. So we had, we collect all these reports by Autobahnpolizei. What the people reported. And because it's, I'm mentioning logistic because it's one system and it's one model in various forms. There is a reduced form of the thing, which we call lighting, and is a design object. It's a lamp, which has different light settings, and it's kind of the smaller version of the bigger thing. So the good thing about this strategy is you can move across the different scales and different manifestations of your work, and you lose no information. The radical thinking about networks, associating with the brain of architect, the building, and the city, is linked to the idea of extension of a human body to digital media. Marshall McLuhan argued, that's Marshall McLuhan, argued that one of consequences of our electronic connection to the globalized network of communication is that we have lost the simple boundary of our body, that our bodies have been expanded to the size of the planet, and therefore irreducibly social. In other words, social life is not one body coming into contact with another, but we share our hyper-interconnected body. McLuhan refers to the new organic biological models of electronic world. Buckminster Fuller argued in the late 1930s that technology is an extension of a human nervous system by expanding all senses of the body to produce a total world encycling network organism, a self-correcting nervous intelligence that could be responded by adopting the comprehensive integrative system logic of a human brain that is echoed rather than traditional form of specialized knowledge. We applied this thinking in our project Library for Information Age, where we try to develop a building topology which is placeless, not bound to the place. As you see in this is a carton box. The photograph is took in LA, I think close to Malibu Beach somewhere, whatever. And to develop the idea which, where the building has no beginning, no end, no scale. So it's just about the space and reading the space, space built out of, purely built out of information, multidimensional, only controlled by, as I said, by the flow of information, and spans across the globe if you want. So this reading of space and space reading was also very important, how we perceive and experience the spaces. Friedrich Kiesler, an Austrian, offers an exploration of the issues when working on extended senses, such in his Vision Machine, drawings from around 1938 to 42. He tried to visualize the perception of an object through a body in a room. Body and a room are displaced by an electrical system, a circuit. Kiesler as a circuit. Kiesler insisted that architecture itself is a species with a nervous system to be wired into that of its occupants. Kiesler, during the time when he was running laboratory for design correlation at Columbia University, made a direct association between organizing of designs produce their intended educational effects and the organization of the teaching machine that had produced them. Dependent of network thinking, both in object, designed and follows laws of hereditary in its own development. In this sense, technology evolves according to generative laws, and Kiesler offers a diagram of how new standard types emerge from productive mutations. We took these ideas further on in thinking about how the human body can then produce the space. Is this possible? And we have been invited to Impulstanz, which is actually a dance festival in Vienna, to work with dancers and choreographers. And we used a motion capturing system to track the motion of the dancers, and not only for choreographical purposes, but also to see what space each dancer describes then, and how we can use this in architecture. We also did, we explored through this movie trailer, or movie we did in 2006, the issues of caves, how we can produce augmented realities which will then expand our world in additional sense. All the installation Golem Strap, proactive installation where we think of technology. I don't know, maybe this is a nice story. Do you know the story of Golem? Who knows the story of Golem? Not many. Golem, I will tell quickly, I don't want to bother you with this, but Golem is a very nice story because it's about supernatural creature created by Rabbi Lev in Warsaw ghetto to protect the Jews. So he created this huge creature out of earth, and the main purpose was to kind of guard the people in the ghetto. But the people, as they are, they misuse the golem. So they asked Golem to bring the water or do other services for them. And by doing that, they misused this tool they have been given. And the golem started to develop humor characteristica. So it fell in love with small girl, and things get complicated. It's a really Hollywood story, but at the end, it got out of control. So Rabbi Lev had to kill him, and you can kill the golem only if you take the word, God's word under his tongue, and then dissolves again into earth. I'm telling this because the golem metaphor is very often used in robotics, and is strongly connected to how we use the technology, because there is no bad technology a priori. I mean, there's nothing wrong with technology. It's always how the people use it. So we try to kind of issue this thing, these topics through this installation. And this is the image. I'm sorry about the quality image. It's a snapshot I did. It's not done yet by a professional photographer. But again, extension of our body. We developed together with Department for Computer Visualization and Graphics in Graz a system where you can kind of manipulate models only with one finger. So you don't need any device, keyboard or mouse or whatever. You can not only manipulate the 3D models, but you can also change them if they are parametric. So it just track your finger, and it is really pretty impressive. So another extension of, as I mentioned, is a project we opened last week in Mützzuschlag. Unfortunately, I don't have videos because it just recently opened. But the idea of this space, which is called sensitive space, is that the space tracks our movement. And we work here with composers and media artists to produce this project. What it does actually, it measures the distance between the people. So it tracks the distance by infrared cameras and sends the data. So we build a small meta machine with max MSP, and we are visualizing this through Voronoi diagram on the floor and kind of oscillograph on the walls. And at a certain moment, you forget about the space, because when you come close to somebody, certain part of a composition will be triggered. So the noise becomes music. So you learn that you actually, with others, you have to come closer and you build your own performative space, if you like. And it's based on idea that we actually do not want to have this classical building topologies where we are forced to listen to music or composition in a certain way. So again, this is, we are building our new tools to achieve what we would like to have. Just the images, how the system works and how this approximates. I mean, it's really nice. I missed the opening, obviously, but as we set up the things, it was at 3 in the morning, and there was a composer, the guy who did programming, and myself, and we are starting dancing in this space. And it's really nice feeling when you kind of have this experience that you're creating music just by the distance to other people. Or the project we are working now for years, City Lab, is a space where we try different concept of augmented realities, again, build out of information and on demand to develop and simulate prototypes. Mostly we do this for the car industry, so they're very interesting in all this. So this is Kisla again, back. This radical combination of psychology, biology, and technology, psychophysiological or biotechnical in Kisla's terms, echoes 19th century debate occurring at the time Darwin formulated his ideas on evolution that can be traced in thinking of Le Corbusier in 1920s, Fuller in 1930s, and up to Marshall McLuhan and experimental architects of 1960s and early 1970s. For example, Superstudio, as previously mentioned, can matter-of-factly describe the computerization of the project for ultimate horizontal surface in terms of the way tools extend human body in 1972. The key development was a gradual shift from nerves through electricity to electronics, where every point on Earth surface is connected up to the network of computers feeding the project. Contemporary thinking about digital media in architecture can already be found in reflections within modern architecture on electricity, traffic, organization, communication, but it has been McLuhan who claimed that the transition from nerves to electronics is finally established. McLuhan visualized humans in completely electronic terms, reclassifying the human as an electronic species, such the architectural responsibility to house humanity become a responsibility to shape flows of information. Design of shelters had turned into design of networks, and laboratory for our current exploration of digital architecture was installed. It should not be assumed that disciplinary brain is creative in the sense of spontaneous production of novel formulations. It could be argued more convincingly that the mechanism is designed to minimize the amount of novel formulations, the best ideas occurring in spite of a system. If the architect is a side effect or concentration in this intelligence system, for example, a form of distributed intelligence, then what does this intelligence do in the transdisciplinary system of connected intelligence? I tried to kind of just summarize a little bit what I was showing also through historical example, and to kind of give you idea a little bit more into detail. I will make it short. There are a lot of theories, concepts, people involved in this talk. I don't want to kind of freak you out now with all this stuff, but it is important for me to see that all of these things we're trying to develop are coming from sound. They're reference to something. They're part themselves of a huge network of knowledge, and we are trying now to establish the proper connections through our work. One of the projects we are showing also at the exhibition is this commercial and office center for Marghera, Italy. And Marghera is the ugly sister of Venice. It's just on the other side. And we're using the ideas of water drops, or green splash drops, as you can call it, which produce a form. But the idea is actually that we have these centers, the main nodes, which are connected and which then control, or let's say, establish the flows through the spaces. As you can see, the actual space is lifted from the ground. So this is how it looks from the top. It's a use green roof also to improve the microclimate. We're working also very much with patterns and in terms of design, but the most important thing is this, that we always have this ground floor flee. We're trying not to kind of manifest the building to go down until to enclose the site. So the site of the public buildings has always to be public and accessible to everybody, to everyone. And you see the interior one of these main nodes, circulation nodes, which from there you can kind of distribute the people around the building. Center for Promotion of Science in Belgrade, Serbia, just a recent project. It was a great competition we entered. Is again try to kind of use these ideas of network not only as concept, but also to see if this can be a functional organizational method within architecture. So we have these nodes and connected skywalks within the building, which then actually start to kind of define the actual architecture in interior, in exterior, on the site, the different paths we are tracking and kind of connecting to each other. And see at night how it works with main entering plaza. And in this conceptual rendering, we are trying also to figure out what that means then for an actual space, how they are organized, how do they produce something new experience. In some cases, later on they completely disappear. They're just like traces of those. In some cases, they are visible and really as orientational points. In some cases, they're just infrastructural or for the bearing of loads, as for the statical purposes. So the whole roof is held by these cones. Another example is a city center for art in Austria. We developed for a smaller city in Austria this community center with hotel and wellness object and a small stadium. So here the idea is everything is about the bridging, about loops and how you can move to different spaces, how the spaces are connected. That was the hotel, that was a fitness center, so you actually walk through different spaces, and the whole form is developed through this movement of the people through the building. So when you see the section, then you see how you can run around the building, and actually you don't have to use the stairs or elevator. And through this movement through the building, you experience different spaces. So we developed a script, like a movie script, a series of sequences where you kind of, what happens when you walk to around the building, and what you can then perceive from looking toward inside or looking toward outside, when you see the facade, or how this interconnection and connection of different level works, which paths are possible, which spaces can be produced. So there was a series, again, of drawings, and the more investigations and kind of simulation of these conditions, which we then use to kind of develop the function and the form of actual building. And in some cases, there are more reduced views, and in some cases, and in this case, you have more kind of Piranesian, I would say, almost very open, very interconnected space. And the last example I showing here is Grand Egyptian Museum in Cairo, which is really truly network building. You see the main nodes, those are circles. They're distributing the movement of people through the building. They facilitate the elevators, and all the ramps come together. That was developed formally through the series of real flow simulations we used to develop kind of those simulate the flows through the spaces, through these containers, given containers for different functions. You see how this then, the particles became a form or a formal manifestation, and then they get solid shapes, which are done through design process, reshaped, refined, until they're designed, properly designed. But the still origin idea diagram is present on all stages. You see the levels of the project and actual networks, how the spaces are connected. So it's also a way to try to kind of figure out if the museum itself can be seen and perceived as a network. So you can choose your own route, how you move through the space, and you're not forced to use predefined path defined by curators. And of course, the whole building is open on the ground floor. Again, we are using these ramps going down as a bristles for administration spaces and different storage spaces and all the spaces which are of secondary functions. And the actual museum evolves around on the top. And also this idea that everybody can move freely around the site, and only if you see the exhibition. Obviously, you have to pay the entrance, but the building is not occupying the site by its mass. We do a lot of light simulations to figure out how the artificial light works. So therefore, computer is a useful tool. Again, the section, you have this infrastructure level under the ground and the ground level, and this, I would call it ORTLOS layer above the ground. You see this in almost every section of our project. And we do not use only to simulate artificial light, we use computer to simulate the daylight and to see what qualities daylight has. So this space is not constructed, it's not designed, it's actually within the three-dimensional model. It is as it is. It's not built out of a floor plan or a section or a view. Oh, I have more. Again, just to kind of underline the ideas, I just spoke about a project for Hong Kong, from cultural district. Again, this layering and connecting, vertical connecting, horizontal connecting of the spaces with, as we saw also in other examples, in section. Project for Kunsthaus in Graz. Which is a building with totally open, so it rains inside. You can walk through the whole building. This is a very Baroque building. We investigate also on relationship between clothes and body. So you see, you walk through this glass facade and solid spaces where the exhibition is. They're circular, so similar like Guggenheim Museum in New York by Frank Lloyd Wright. So they are developed around the spiral, actually. Therefore, you see various unexpected, I would say, corners. But in the interior, you see this is open, a light-filled space. As I said, it rains inside. It's open to everybody. The curators or the museum directors that do not have power of this space. So it can be, for example, used by artists themselves to kind of play with this space. And as you see here, it connects also the different pathways in the city. So the urban reason is that you kind of do not block existing ways, but you invite the people and let them use buildings in maybe not planned and not predictable ways, but in more free and open way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. Is there any question?
You're speechless. Is this good or bad?
I have a question. That is that you showed quite a lot of examples from the 60s. And I was just wondering where you're standing in a way, because a lot of what you're talking about in terms of the network and the practice that you operate on a very fluid system, which is shifting all the time. There is was sort of a clear hierarchy of steps. But many of these 60s examples are actually rather static conditions. They envision something quite dynamic, but actually were quite static. Particularly because they were sort of megastructures where the expressiveness of the structure or the circulation infrastructure was very clear, but actually rather static. And I wonder where you are standing, because you have work that is more installation, which is in a sense more fluid, where the sort of framework is probably static, but then the imagery that is projected is quite fluid. Or you work in the infrastructure of the large-scale building, as you showed, and that again is sort of based on something far more static. Now in this building, as you well know, you have people that are interested in interactive architecture and responsive architecture. They're trying to sort of blur this idea that architecture is static, and it's actually something far more responsive and dynamic. And I just wonder where you are standing, because you assume and accept the static nature of the large scale. At the same time, you are interested in the sort of much more fluid, ephemeral quality of the small scale. And you play with both, as if they sort of coexist. And I just wonder where ORTLOS is sort of mainly placed. In this sort of duality, in the way of these two worlds. And probably with Dennis Compton as being one of the only ones that clearly played with both mechanisms coexisting, the megastructure as a network system that was relying on a very fluid system. But maybe he was also the least formal of all of those people, because he proposed something that is much more of a network rather than a formal proposal. And in a way, every time that there is a need of a formal proposal, as you showed, for instance, when you did the motorway installation, it's like a frozen condition that wishes to be dynamic, but is actually then frozen through its formal decision or compromise. And I just wonder how or where you're standing, and how the discussions around the table when you get to the formal proposals make you decide for this acceptance that actually architecture itself is very static. And I remember, for instance, Peter Cook saying that he for years was interested in the idea of the metamorphosis of architecture, but after 40 or 50 years of playing with this idea, he had recognized that architecture probably doesn't accept it, because there is something intrinsically static about architecture that we cannot change. And he's still fascinated with it. And I just, again, wonder whether you accept it as a given condition, or you believe that there is intrinsically something far more fluid that might affect the large scale as well, but maybe doesn't appear right now.
I think this is a very interesting question, which I'm not able to answer so quickly. I have to really think of it. But if I would say, if I could give you a quick answer, I would then say that for me, it was always, in German there is a good saying, it's not entweder oder, ist sowohl als auch. So to translate, it's not like either this or that, so it's both at the same time. And you mentioned, before I started architecture, I actually have a diploma in computer science, and I was trained to work with very complex systems, to program them, to kind of provide algorithms how I can organize them. And the second thing is, I love information overflow. You know, like I'm used to it. I'm not scared. I don't need to simplify the things, and I allow also in my architecture things to coexist, to be parallel there, and not to exclude one or the other. The advantage I have compared to these great people from the 60s is simply that I have now technological means and to do certain things. And I mean, all these concepts I'm mentioning, and also I made a little bit more sarcastic observation at the beginning where I compared fluid with a modern data visualization. For me, it's the same thing. You know, the humans are always preoccupied how in the hell we can organize these complex things in architecture. And it gets more and more complex. It gets more and more, you know, and what happens right now in architecture discourse is, because we cannot organize, strategically organize this waste amount of information and knowledge, we try to reduce. And we are starting to love simply boxes, simple architecture, reduce banal almost, you know? Or we're just going crazy formally, to wash our hands from, now nobody can criticize this. What I actually always try to do is, and it's really based on this image, that I have to see this on 3 different levels, which is a simulation of spaces, and based on the task I'm working on. This is the virtual prototyping. Then another question is how I work, how the practice then work, how I generate this, which is the virtual enterprise. And the third is about in which spaces I can realize this. Not only in which spaces, but how the space is then responsive. You mentioned the thing in the wing. It is frozen, yes. It is a frozen condition of a flow simulation. But on the other hand, this is only how it is designed. More important is, as I mentioned, not how it looks like or how it functions, but what it does. And what it does is when you sit in your car and drive by, then you do this, because all of a sudden a 60-meter long structure floating in the air, and then the moment where, it was there, consciously you realize it, then you come up to this big structure, and through the movement it became one. And this is kind of dynamic way of preserving the information, or perceiving the space, let's say. And in other cases, like say, when we talk about our new interactive responsive tools, either in direct interaction with machines, with technology, like with this one-point figure system, or let's say when the space, we don't see any technology. In the sensitive space, what we installed in Nutzumschlag, you don't see any technology, it's just empty. And it's there, sitting there. It's like a huge room full of computers, which are constantly working, and the cameras and all stuff, but you don't see anything. You just see the other humans. And you don't interact with technology in this case. So the technology is not responsive in the classical way. Because I also thought we have to stop also to be so responsive in terms that we always have to weave to computer and say hello and to kind of do this and that, or we have to move the mouse, or we have to wear funny hats with reflective balls, or kind of, you know, all these devices. Why we cannot be just ourselves, and then the space is responsive to us. So, and there are different ways how you can approach your questions. Therefore, your questions is hard for me to answer it more precisely. I can only say that what we tried the last 10 years, not to include anything. Therefore, I said at the beginning, my biggest fear is to miss something exciting. And I want to keep all of this. And now I'm trying to, for 10 years, I'm trying to establish the strategies and the ways how I can influence this network of different kind of issues or different kind of possibilities in order to really understand the performance of the spaces I'm planning, and not to be stuck in a functional, formal, or any other, let's say, more or less classical architecture discussion, but to be more kind of open up to the other achievements in other disciplines, in technology, in science, in philosophy, in media art, and so on, and to natively incorporate this in architecture, not to kind of put on top of it and kind of use it as a kind of decoration or whatever. So obviously I cannot do this alone, and although I like this idea of universal man, of this Renaissance Leonardo da Vinci guy who knows everything, but our domains of knowledge became so huge that I need the others, and I have to open up as well the language of architecture to them. I have to abandon something I learned from my teachers in order to make possible that the other people who are also very focused on their domains to kind of find a common sense and to find kind of motivation to develop something together. And for me, this is the next step, this is the next things we will work on to improve this kind of connected intelligence I'm talking about. So this idea of networks, as I said, is on many levels. It's on design level, on thinking level, on operational level, or functional level, and always by asking the question of performative in terms of what the doing does.
Could there be, in a way, an argument whereby one says that the application of your theory comes across in the clearest manner, either in a very large scale or in a very small scale, and has more difficulties to be applied when it gets into the intermediate building scale. In other words, when you look at the city as a very complex network of various interfering conditions, not just on the level of circulation or social levels or the information age we live, and I think the Louis Kahn diagram was extremely successful because it made one think, yes, now I get what he's talking about. It's actually on a larger scale. This is extraordinary complex system, which then situation distance on all these people we're discussing on a very large scale. At the same time, on the very small scale, the installation scale, where the one-to-one interfacial condition, where you said that the boundaries of the body are sort of exploded through the extensions of our senses, through the notion that we become submerged in a sort of virtual, half real world, I think work incredibly well. But then when it becomes a building, there's more difficulties in sort of establishing itself because it's not big enough, it's not small enough to sort of operate. Interestingly, your buildings are always sort of large buildings where you have the need of almost introducing sort of city scale, where the nodes of circulation become sort of like miniatures of large cities in one building, and the Graz building definitely demonstrated that. You sort of lost the sense of hierarchy almost inside the building. And in a way, basically rephrasing my question, I wonder whether there's an issue of scale here, where your methodology, when applied, works extremely well on these two sort of extreme different levels. It becomes sort of far more difficult because it has to compromise with form. It's probably slightly less clear when it's sort of in this sort of building scale where one thinks, interesting, where did you get that from? Oh, it's a bit of Keystone, or it's a bit of somebody else, because there's a need of references that makes one understand what sort of formal decision was made. Whereas on the other ones, it has less to do with that. It's much to do with an operative sort of level, conceptual level.
Well, I try to avoid I have to admit, I try always to avoid a formal discussion in terms of where something came from. But to answer now, I think I understood the question. I think it is scaleless because a network, a presentation of a network is scaleless, but a priori scaleless. You know, when we see these diagrams of data visualization or any kind of diagram showing networks, they're not graphics. They're just like they don't have form in a way. Yeah, and I think this is kind of what really influenced me is a German designer called ORTLOS, who has said that even a doorknob is a city planning project. So it can be a city planning project if you think of it. And I think this is kind of the Deleuzian map where there's no beginning or the end, you're always in the middle. And if the system is coherent on all levels, I will claim that the scale is not an issue, let's say. It is possible to shift information system and to kind of manipulate it on different levels. Funnily enough, I wanted this image for kind of promotion of this lecture, and then I saw you put my single-family house with it as an image. I decided not to show this project because I thought it's too small, it's not interesting. But there is even smaller projects we did, architectural, which is a restaurant we rebuilt, and it was the ceiling we did also as a kind of network and lines going around and so on and so on. So we worked on, I didn't show everything, but we worked, I can assure you, we worked on different scales, and what we try to apply is exactly this scaleless by by working with information system which is coherent and works at different levels as architectural solid space, like something which is manifest, or a virtual simulation, or added information, whatever, augmented reality if you want. And therefore, I think it's also sometimes not maybe clear enough, you know, when maybe sometimes when you want to show all these things how they work together, it can become really, you know, not readable anymore. But I think the answer to your question it could be that we tried to kind of produce a system which works on different scales, and it's not scale-based, so it's not about size. Because again, it's not about form or function, it's really about performance, what the space does. And more particular, what strategy, network strategy can generate the space, visualize the space, and so on and so on.
I was just going to, in reference to what you're talking about, I feel like part of the issue that the networking concept struggles at the building scale is due to possibly the programmatic lack of complexity of each one of those projects per se. So if you're doing something that is very simple programmatically for what facilities you're providing for this building, it's very hard to make it, you know, with the city, you're pulling in a million bits of information and organizing that. And so it becomes an entirely, there's still a networking possibility, but then the factors you're dealing with, I would say, have to be something completely different, because you can't have the same complexity of information. It's a totally different, not field, but it's a totally different way of interpreting that information and what information you look at. So I still, it was hard for me in some of the buildings to see where it wasn't just a representation of a network instead of actually networking. It was a formal representation of it, and I think that's still, like, the gesture is still there, the concept is still there, but I think a lot of that might have to do with the programmatic issues that come along with just making buildings in general. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, well, what you're claiming is that the size of a physical space or a manifestation of the space determines the complexity of it.
I'm saying where the client's requirements for what they need out of the building, less the size of the volumes or the square footage, more what the client needs and the space allocation.
Well, that's something I tried to answer before. I don't think that the size of the building determinant or the list of the requirements determines the complexity of the space. And another thing is, I still believe, and this is something I learned from the 70s, where Raymond Abraham now told me that architecture is not about the building. I mean, it's like building is not necessarily the only output of architectural process. So the building topology is just one of the possible manifestations when we think and discuss the spaces, or talk to kind of, I don't know, people like Libus Woods, for example. He will tell you that architecture is purely abstract. Or even Domenic, my teacher, who built a lot, he said architects do not build, the builders do. And as I said, in the project for a demo house, for example, there was a complexity in terms of building services. Today, when we talk about passive houses or low energy houses, there are certain building services which became so complex that we cannot manage them. So in the terms, it's a network again. You know, if you gain the solar power, this influenced the type of heating you're using, that influenced the type of ventilation you're using, that influenced the type of, do you have daylighting or not, do you let the heat in or not, how you do all of these things. And this is really, again, very complex, or it can be a very complex network even for a small house. For example, in this demo house, we really tried to work with daylighting as a design parameter. So we tried to design all the spaces which proper amount of daylighting, so we reduced artificial lighting, for example. And this is also, again, very, very complex issue, if you want. Or some other examples which are complex in terms where you don't necessarily see the complexity, you know? In the example of sensitive space, as I said, visually the complexity is not there through your experience. I mean, it's around you, it's invisible. It's all about computation and how you generate the system. But it's not kind of popping into your eye and saying, oh, I'm complex, look at me. So there are different levels how you deal with issue of complexity. And also in this term, I don't want to kind of promote only complexity. I think in this sense, the complexity and simplicity, so it's complex simplicity, go together well. And I try to explain here briefly in 1 hour. I know it's not without producing overkill and information, yeah, but to try to express that I'm really interested in this performative aspect of architectural design. And then everything else is just like, you know, you like it, you don't like it, whatever. But it is a clear strategy how we approach the project, how we kind of make a setup for each project, how we develop this project, and this will last 10 years. So that's something I can answer.
I was really interested in the interface that you developed that bridged the disciplines together, and I was wondering like how a typical session working with the different specialists would go, and how much of that information eventually like makes it to the final project, and also how you manage all that information that comes in.
It was a struggle. It was always a struggle, and it will be a struggle. And we had a couple of big failures, big time failures. A couple of big projects failed, and a couple of big projects have been successful. So we had to learn a lot about not only how you exchange the ideas, but also about motivation, responsibility, conflict of interest, even silly things like vanity, you know? When you work with experts who are good in their fields, they're super sensible to everything what you say or whatever you do. Then you have to change the way how you communicate things. You have to kind of learn what they do and to kind of give them kind of, you know, provide them interface so they can hook up. So you have to make yourself interesting for them. So a lot of work has to be done in this direction. And then, as I said, I noticed that through classical ways of communication, working together, either emailing, Skyping, or let's say data repositories where you upload the files, download the files. This is all not very sufficient. This is all very linear, you know, and hard to control. You have huge managerial responsibility all the time, and then all of a sudden you say, hey, well, wait a minute, I'm designer actually here, I'm not a manager of the project. I want to kind of have also time for design, and vice versa, just to kind of manage different people. And for that reason, we start thinking about how this can work, what is the strategy behind of this collaboration. We did not experience until now, and we also not trained. When I was trained, all my teachers had this attitude, I'm an architect, I'm an artist, I'm the God, you know, and everybody else is here to serve me, you know, and I tell everybody what to do. And I think also in discussion in art this changed, you know, like this signature artist idea, like, and what artwork then means through Walter Benjamin and many other examples change as well. But we have to learn this. Many people, unfortunately, all these things, sometimes when I mention these words like networks, performative design and so on, they became kind of buzzwords almost, you know, but it's not my fault. I mean, if you see this in advertising, networks, it's their fault. You know, I notice still today, after 10 years, that in some cases we have to start from the very beginning, you know, to introduce the people to each other, to connect them, to bring them together, as I said, to motivate them. And also these transdisciplinary projects we did until now are more demanding, more expensive, they last longer, and at the end, they're fun, they're much more fun. I learn a lot, and I benefit from other expertise in a way I could never benefit from purely consulting experts. And many things happens on the way. It's really like this, you know, like City Lab Ivan I mentioned. It's just a spin-off of another project which did not seems to work. So all of a sudden we end up with a new project just because the other one didn't work, but there was something new in the team emerged. It's like a snowball. You get all this information, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and at a certain moment you create a critical mass for your project. Well, something else unexpected will happen. And then this forces you as a designer, in some cases, to kind of let things go and to kind of react, to be more flexible, you know, how you change your strategy. Therefore, also, once again, I think that the design thinking has to change, because you will be faced with the fact that you cannot control all the steps, and you need a system, you need a strategy, how you can operate and get the maximum out of it. And this is something we have been doing for the last 10 years.
You've talked about this technocultural conflict in doing all those projects over the years. Obviously, a lot of the things you do rely on technology, rely on virtuality and the networks. And you've been developer yourself for some of these platforms, so you could have been a user and producer of these systems. How do you see over that time this whole acceleration of obsolescence of platforms or technologies that will become the carrier of this interaction to produce the bigger platforms we are? Do you think there is a problem with all the technologies that we're using and the speed they obsolesce and how that influences our practice?
This is a very good question. If I may now give a personal answer to this, and not really academic answer, it drives me crazy sometimes, and I have the feeling I cannot pick up all of these things that are happening right now. Compared to the Renaissance, it was much more comfortable to be universal man than to be today. But I have to say I also try to be early adopter. For good or for bad. For good because I really react on something which happens and try to incorporate immediately, and for bad, I don't have sometimes time for certain things to go in much more depth. You know, so the people who are criticizing us, for example, they will criticize us mostly for that we are too fast, moving too fast, fast forward, as Tom Main writes in his book. And as I said, this is for good and for bad, but or for academia, there's always this discussion how fast you can move. Because if you go to TED, to conference TED, the most seen movie, the most influential, inspiring movie is by Deborah Gordon. Really brilliant woman, but she investigated and exploded ants for 20 years. She had a small pen. She developed a small pen where she put marks on ants, and then follows the ants, how they work, what they do in the colony for 20 years. You know, and this is the most viewed video. The people like it, and it's fascination. You know, like when you. But then I think, oh my God, should I like investigate ants for 20 years? To kind of, I simply don't have time for that. And it's like when I think of, I recently saw Facebook is going on. I mean, this guy is the youngest billionaire with 26. I don't know how old he is in 3 years. You know, these are crazy times we live in, and this has influence to architecture as well. We have to give up certain dogmas and certain beliefs, you know, otherwise we cannot pick up this race. Everybody is like kind of going around us, and we're standing here and fortifying our position. And unfortunately, as Marco said, I was one of the pioneers in Graz at that time, and now I don't have time anymore for this discussion. I was always kind of felt I have to protect this and I have to explain this, but now I said, like, people, I'm sorry, I have to go. You know, it's like, as you like or not. And this is a very personal answer. It's getting late, so I'm getting personal, but it is really true. You know, it's how I work. I like what I do. It's all these things happening around and I want to be part of these things, you know, and I want to use the architecture as the media, but I also want to think about all the possibilities and not just to follow predefined paths given by my teachers or by my colleagues, who I all respect, but I want also to see what the next step is. And Libeskind was a guy who said the architecture comes to a certain dead end, but it's not a dead end, it's the beginning of something new. And you cannot go in the future with your backs turned to the future. You have to turn yourself and to see what's going on, to deal with other experts, other domains, and to see how this may change the architecture on every level. And the good thing about architecture, why I did not, I mean, I thought always I made a mistake. I should stay with computer science and do software programming and be rich now, be Mark Zuckerberg, or I don't know, Bill Gates with my glasses or something. But I think I'm happy with architecture because it's a profession where I can do all of these things, and it's never the same. It's always new challenges. And thinking about space, because I always think about space in general, not about buildings or these solid things, but I think space in general, it opens up so much possibilities how you can deal with this space, how you can generate them, how you can kind of make them interesting or usable for the people on many levels, culturally, socially, politically. In all our projects, I don't mention this, I do this only when I talk in Berlin. But there's a political message, you know? There is always a political message. This decision to keep the ground floor open, not to block the site with a building is actually a political message. Therefore, I show constant. Because, therefore, it's the reason why we lose the competitions, because the curators look at our projects, they're like, but where we put the kind of meter, where we kind of charge the tickets, you know, how we close the building at night, you know? And, you know, this is something we try to incorporate in the way how we do architecture, and I really like it. So.
Maybe on this personal note, we thank you again for the talk.